welcome everyone. So I know that John Sarna has something because he always does, and it's always something cool, and that Dan Frey has something that he's been working on. But other than that, I don't know who brought things to share tonight. Janet's there and Brad. So how about we start with John because this is the only time of the year we get to see him.
Uh, you've heard me talk in previous visits about the family's Masonic apron and about a jar, a jam jar that was, excuse me, supposedly in the same household. Well, over the last several years, I've been going through a number of um, family possessions, family items, um, kind of sorting through them, organizing them. And by happy chance, some time ago, I came across a collection of coins, currency that my father, primarily my father, to a certain extent my mother, had been collecting even before I was born. Some of the coins were handed down from their parents, both my mother and my father's family. And earlier this year, I was going through uh, the collections. I wanted to figure out, oh, get them a little bit more organized, pennies, nickels, quarters, and so on. And then chronologically. With one exception, what I'm about to show you came from that particular collection. And for some of them, I was not even aware until I started going through their collections, of memorabilia, that some of these coins were part of that collection. Now, you're going to have to excuse me because I'm going to have to move this camera around to where things will look a little bit better, a little bit stronger. Okay, but there you go. There you go. On the top row are three 50-cent pieces, three half-dollar pieces. And I've got them in chronological order, 1865, 1869, 1874. So spanning the tail end of the Civil War, as well as going through the Reconstruction years. I wanted to call your attention, since you're out Pasadena, for regional interests. I don't know if you can make it out, but this particular half-dollar came from the San Francisco Mint. So yes, in this collection, certainly in this little representation, California is represented in kind of this roundabout way. But and interestingly, this coin from the half-dollar from 1865 is the one that is really in the best condition. Moving down here, and again, this is something I did not know even existed in this collection until I came across it. That's not a penny. It's a token. It is a Civil War token from the pivotal year of 1863. It's roughly about the size of what would become known as the Indian head penny, roughly about the size of the Lincoln penny that we all know and love. But if you can see on the back, the logo is God Protect the Union. God Protect the Union. All of that was in the collection. Now, this last bit, this last one, I came across quite by accident as a young man. I was visiting my paternal grandmother, and she was going through a few of her drawers. She was looking to throw out a number of items that she thought she was never ever going to be able to use. So she asked me to go through one drawer, and way down at the bottom was this particular piece. 1864 2-cent piece. And I asked her about this coin. She knew absolutely nothing about it, and then just casually said, "Well, would you like to have it?" "Oh, yes, yes, I wanted to have it." But here,
1864 2-cent piece. And you might not be able to see it too clearly, but at the very top, I wanted to call your attention to the logo, if you will, and a little trivia about the 1864 2-cent piece. Now, we're all pretty well familiar with the saying that's on a lot of our currency today, "In God we trust." The 1864 2-cent piece was the very first American coin in which "In God we trust" was emblazoned. No American coin, to my knowledge, no American coin before this one, before the 1864 2-cent piece, had "In God we trust" put on it. But here you see this link, this financial, this monetary link to the American Civil War. There are other coins that I found. Unfortunately, the American coins are well after the Civil War, some from the 1880s, 1890s, and on into the first part of the 20th century. But here, quite by accident, were several that have this link to the American Civil War period. That's what I've got for this time around. If I can answer any particular questions that any of you may have, I'll try. Let me see if I can bring the camera down a little bit more so.
John, have you had any of these appraised that you might know what the current value of these are?
Uh, I did some random checking a few days ago. The 1865 half-dollar may be worth a little under $400, as is. The 2-cent piece, I'm not exactly sure. I'm not exactly sure, but that could be in the neighborhood of $100 in that condition. The token, I'm not sure about. I might want to say maybe $40 because it's not a quote unquote coin of the realm, but it is very definitely Civil War token. And as you can see, that a good deal of the value is going to be determined by the condition of the coin. The more you get towards what is called uncirculated or proof, of course, the more valuable it's going to be. Oh, and by the way, I forgot to mention the other two, the 1869 and the 1874 half-dollar and the 2-cent piece, are from the Philadelphia Mint. There's no mark on any of these coins, and so that means usually that they are from the Philadelphia Mint. But once again, this one, like I said a few minutes ago, California is represented because it is, once again, from the San Francisco Mint.
John, we had a question in the chat asking for you to tell a little more about the token, if you could.
The token was, as far as I remember reading about, the token was a way of fundraising for the Union war effort. You would have, it might have been put out by the United States Sanitary Commission. It might have been put out by another organization, but if you made a contribution, to the Union war effort, that was one of the rewards that you, well, look at it this way. Most of our roundtables, and it may not be a totally accurate analogy, but most of the roundtables, ours, for example, we have raffle tickets, and we raffle off books. But again, maybe like at a later time, World War I, World War II, you went in to support the war effort. You got savings bonds, savings stamps, and so on. For the Civil War, one of the things that you got to, if you will, commemorate or to reward your financial settlement was a token such as this one. Other questions, other comments, anything?
I wonder if the token was sold at one of the big Civil War fairs that they used to have, the Sanitary Commission and others. I think there was one in New York and Philadelphia.
Mm-hmm. Certainly in the larger northern metropolitan areas, for sure.
Yeah.
Very likely, very likely. When again, I found the coins just really as they are. There was no written information about them. These coins were just crammed in a little box and a little bag with all kinds of other coins, a number of them from the United States, but believe it or not, I found a 1 Pfennig coin from 1874 Germany, and found a tuppence, a 2-cent piece from Victoria's era, 1897, I believe. So the family just had all of these coins and some paper currency collected. Unfortunately, no paper currency older than, say, the 1920s. But these very definitely are the ones.
Oh, sorry.
No, go ahead, please.
You know when the 2 cent coin was initially minted, and how long did that coin stay in circulation?
1864 was the very first year.
Okay.
And if I'm not mistaken, it went on, I think, to the early 1870s, and then it was discontinued.
Maybe it gave the idea of the $2 bill.
No, but believe it or not, before the Civil War, a fairly interesting denomination was a 3-cent coin.
Okay.
There was literally a 3-cent piece that you had in the years leading up to the war itself. I think it was discontinued once the war got underway. But there's a very interesting film called The Tall Target, a movie that was made in 1951, starring an Arkansan, believe it or not. His name is Dick Powell,
Oh, yeah.
and
Sure.
it was a somewhat fictionalized version of the plot to kill Abraham Lincoln on his way to Washington, D.C., when he made a stop, supposed to be a stop in Baltimore. And Dick Powell makes a reference to having a 3-cent piece, gives it to a kid in order to get some information out of the kid.
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
I was going to say with the penny deposed, maybe we could re-establish the 2 cent penny coin.
Well, in 1864, you're going to see the first concerted effort by the federal government, by the North, to standardize paper currency. And you're going to have it standardized. And if I'm not mistaken, that's where you're going to get the real push to limit the range of denominations. Oh, and a little something about the bills. Lincoln would be on the paper currency. He would be associated fairly quickly with the $5 bill. But on the face of so many of the $1 bills was the then Secretary of the Treasury, Salmon Portland Chase. And Chase, for a little bit of political advantage, made sure his face was on a good number of the $1 bills, because it was a way of drawing people's attention to the possibility that Salmon Portland Chase was going to challenge Lincoln for the 1864 presidential nomination. So this was, in a manner of speaking, it was a little bit of free advertising to get his face literally out to the public.
Yeah.
And John, I looked up and it said that the 2 cent piece was available from 1864 to 1872. with some for collectors in 1873. So just
Mhm.
about 8 years, that was it.
Mhm. Mhm.
Also, in regards to the 3 cent piece, I actually have one of those. I don't have it with me here. I believe it's in our storage unit, but I do have one of the 3 cent pieces. Those are made of silver,
Mhm.
and that they're really, really thin. It's just so
Mhm.
thin. But
They
I do
are.
actually have one of those as well.
Mhm. And these half dollars are primarily silver. There is a little bit of copper in them, but I think it's like a 90% silver, 10% copper mix.
Hmm.
The 2 cent piece, I'm going to go with that it is copper as well as the token. I'm not a metallurgist or anything like that,
Don't
but
test them. Don't test those on the show here.
beg your pardon?
Like the gold piece, you test it with biting it. Don't do that with your coins.
Well, if my teeth were that strong, I might, but better not.
Okay.
But no, seriously, seriously. Um, I see in the chat, what would half a dollar get you in 1865? It would get a substantial amount of groceries then, unlike today. But let me see. Oh me.
Ticket to Ford's Theater on the night of the assassination was only a quarter.
Uh, well, let me see. You probably would be able to get a good amount of flour in going to um, a dry goods store. You could probably also get a pretty good bolt of calico or other cloth. I'm not going to say cotton, what with the wartime, shall we say, strains, but those would be a couple of basics that you could probably get for a half dollar. And half a dollar, keep in mind, was in some professions that was a day's wages. You're not going to see the whopping increase to $1 a day until you really get closer to the end of the century, and that's kind of across the board.
Don, that's really interesting. This is Emily from Redlands. That I appreciate you kicking us off with the coinage story. The first 1 cent coin that was issued in the U.S. was by a private mint in 1787. And
Mhm.
on one side of the coin that was thought to be designed by Benjamin Franklin, it read
Mhm.
"Mind your business," and the other side said "We are one." And then at the other end of the bookend, for people who are visiting John Wilkes Booth's family plot in Greenmount Cemetery in Baltimore, some people who are unionists leave the Lincoln penny face up to show that Lincoln gets the last word.
Mm. Well, and going back to the Revolutionary War, a little trivia for you. I talked about this in my classes that there was a tremendous amount of counterfeiting of American paper currency during the Revolutionary War. The design of the paper currency was so easy to forge, easy to counterfeit, and the quality of the paper, but more so the ink, was atrocious. Dampness, well, the ink would start running off onto the person's fingers, their palms. The British tried on several occasions to flood the American market with counterfeit American paper currency.
Hmm.
Ironically, the British counterfeits were of better quality paper, and so kind of a snarky way of the merchants and whatnot being able to tell whether or not it was real or counterfeit. I kind of snarked it a little bit this way, that the merchants would look at the hands, the fingers of the people paying the money. If the fingers got dirty, the money was clean. But if the fingers remained clean, the money was dirty.
Hmm. You found a counterfeiter, huh?
Hmm. Again, Ironically, the counterfeit product was on better quality paper and had better quality, more permanent, non-running ink.
Hmm. Was
But
there counterfeiting going on during the Civil War?
That's why the Secret Service came into place
Okay.
April 14th, 1865 is because of that.
mhm,
All right.
mhm. Yeah. And who handled a lot of the counterfeiting that went on ahead of time? A fellow by the name of Alan Pinkerton.
Yeah.
hmm and that was how Pinkerton really got involved in becoming the private detective and starting up the Pinkerton Agency, counterfeiting. Any other questions? Any other things about the coins or anything? Okay, thank you for letting me bend your ears for a little bit.
My
So
screen changed the order in which we have them, but I think we'll go with Dan next, and then Brad, and then Janet of the ones I have hands up.
Okay, hello everybody. My name is Dan Fry. I've been coming to the Pasadena Civil War Roundtable for a couple years now, believe it or not. I can't believe how fast that went. And I had the opportunity of a lifetime. I work in the entertainment business. I'm a carpenter. I build movie sets, and once in a while I get a really cool job that takes me out of town. So I'm going to try to share my screen here because I prepared a slideshow. This is where our story begins. Well, I was married at one time, and that marriage ended. And I was grieving it pretty heavily. And I was looking through Meetup and stumbled across something going on at the Blinn House, which was the Civil War Round Table. And so I showed up. And I came and I wanted to see the inside of the building where I got married. And this is our this is our banquet that's being presented in the room where we meet. This is the living room where our guests came to witness our marriage. And there are some of the family and friends that came. Of course, this is the inside of the Blinn living room. And there we are, a happy groom and bride. And the Blinn House at the time was the Women's Club of Pasadena, and this was their specialty, which were popovers. So the first presenter I saw that night when I came to the Blinn House, to the Pasadena Civil War Round Table, was a gentleman by the name of Max Harsha, who portrayed Ely Parker, who was a secretary to Ulysses S. Grant. Now, I am no historian, I am no expert, I am just a ham Civil War guy. So I'm depending on you, the community, to correct me, add information, or whatever it is that you need to do. You can share a little blip if you wish I don't know, just to relate to the story. I've got a lot of little pieces. I'm kind of a trivia nerd. So I'll go down little rabbit holes from time to time, but I'll try to stay on the surface for most of this. And I'll try to be quick with this. So it's really just an introduction so that you can get to know me and see some of the really cool things and places I did. So I get a job in Atlanta and I drive out there, and it happens to be April. Here's the Blinn House. It happens to be April of 2024, and at that time, I land in Vicksburg just by process. I drove for, I think, 2 days at that point, and so I'm in Vicksburg. And these are some of the earthworks at Vicksburg, which I'd spent a lot of time on a previous job years before and never got to explore the battlefield. So they have a really well um, presented battlefield at Vicksburg, which is where I learned of General Grant and his terms of surrender and just the grooming of him as a general, who I've really come to respect. So this is Vicksburg during a 92% solar eclipse. So that was spectacular to be at this location during this event. And here is some more of the battlefield. Um, and so by seeing this presenter, Max Harshaw, doing his Ely Parker, I was completely taken by the depth that he got into this character, and of course he's got some indigenous American Indian blood in him, so it kind of fed his passion, I think, that much more, and I sense that deeply. So I have a motive here on this trip. And I have to say, I don't know if you can see my thing, but I picked up this magazine off the literature table there at it, and it's the Civil War in Georgia. And it's just a really well presented publication of all of the interesting homes, battlefields, museums, cemeteries, memorials, parks, and attractions in Georgia. So this book will become my tour guide when I get to Georgia. So I leave Vicksburg not knowing what is about to unfold. This is a map I found at the Kennesaw Monument Memorial. I don't know what they call it. And this is a map showing the distribution of enslaved people in the 1860 census. And as you can see, how much of the population is concentrated along the Mississippi, and of course down by Savannah and South Carolina. And these are all places that I'm going to visit on my trip. So I'm headed to Georgia to work on a major motion picture, and I am going to be there for many, many months. So this is part of the rabbit hole I fall into, which are the people. And so at this point, I'm looking for myself. I'm trying to find me. Who is my Eli Parker? Ely Parker. What character am I going to relate to? And so I'm reading about all these people, and this guy, uh, Colonel James Brownlow, and 10 troopers stripped to the skin and swim the Chattahoochee River on July 9th in an act of raw courage, quote unquote. They charge and capture the rebel outpost wearing nothing but cartridge boxes. Now, this is the kind of Civil War stuff that I really like. This really brings the human part of it into my living room. Here's another poor guy, Private John Roberson. He survives the fighting at Kennesaw, only to be shot in the stomach on June 27th when someone accidentally knocks over a stand of stacked muskets. Roberson dies of his wound that same day. So that's a character I was thinking about, but he didn't have a very long career. And so this is kind of what my passion is doing for me. And then I come along this guy, Colonel Dan McCook, at Kennesaw. He is actually at the dead angle. I don't know if anyone's familiar with this, but this is a stronghold in the Confederate line, and Colonel Dan. A lot of people call me Lieutenant Dan at work, so I kind of latched onto this guy because he was, of course, a Union military guy, and I was raised in Chicago, so that makes me by default a Union person. So anyway, I thought, well, Dan McCook, now that could be a character I could really dig into. So, anyway, here is the dead angle right here at Cheatham Hill on that horrible, horrible battle where thousands of people fell. And I cannot tell you how many battlefields, cornfields, wheat fields, sunken roads I walked. I walked pretty much most of the state of Georgia. And here is an earthwork, which really impressed me, was seeing all the earthworks and the work that the men did to put up their defenses. So that was really impressive to actually see the real thing is still there. And this is actually the point of the dead angle. And in that field in the foreground, I heard it was littered with 2 or 3 bodies deep. And they actually, correct me, had to actually stop the battle a few times to clear the bodies because there were too many people moaning and they couldn't hear the commands and things like that. It's just awesome when you're there in person. You can almost feel the spirit or the event that took place there. So here is something fun, and it's called the Civil War Twin. It's a website put on by the American Battlefield Trust where you can upload a picture and they'll find your Civil War twin. So this is my Civil War twin, Private Cranmore Wallace. And I don't think we look anything alike, but according to this website, we do. So, moving along, I have a friend who lives in Athens, Georgia. Now, I'm there for 4.5 months, and for 4.5 months, you'll never guess what I'm doing every weekend. I am traveling all over the state, going to battlefields, walking them, learning about them. I'm by myself. I can have endless conversations and spend endless amounts of time on details or whatever I choose to do. So my friend Curtis took me to this place. This is the Augusta Powder Works, and helped me with this. As far as I understand, when Richmond fell, the gunpowder came now from Augusta, and it was a quite the trick for the soldiers and the artillery people to get used to this new mix of powder, which I understand lost them many battles and skirmishes because of the inaccuracy and just the just getting used to a new recipe, I guess. So that was something I didn't know. But my friend Curtis somehow found an open door and we were able to access inside of the building. And so what you're seeing is some good old federal style decay. Um, this is a treatment in peeling paint and cracked plaster. This is what I do for a living, so these are great reference photos for me to use later when we try to recreate things that look like this. So I really get off architecture as my second passion, and so I'm taking lots of pictures of architecture while I'm on my trip. Um, and then Georgia ends. I pretty much went to everything in Georgia. I was getting down to skirmishes, and I knew it was time to leave. I was there for 4.5 months, and I think I covered every major battlefield there is in Georgia. And so my brother, who lives in Virginia, has a 400-acre farm adjacent to Thomas Fortune Ryan's Oak Ridge, which is a famous estate. He was the second owner. I guess it was granted from England during the Revolution. It landed in this guy's hands. He was the 10th wealthiest man in the world. He had his own train station. He had his own power plant. He lived, I think, 1820s to early 1900. But anyway, he sold my brother a section of the farm. The family did. So my brother's actually the third owner of this property, which is right in the heart of the Shenandoah Valley. And so this was my base camp for the next 2.5 months. It's in Arrington, which is between Lynchburg and Charlottesville. My brother puts on very large music festivals. As you can see, this is one that's going up. Usually anywhere from 40 to 50,000 people show up and they put on live music events. So I'm very fortunate to have had this. This was my lodging, which is the hayloft, which was converted into a residence. And the property is just absolutely stunning. This is the innkeeper's house and the corner market or the general store. And this is from 1780s, probably late 1770s are the era of these houses. This is a tobacco barn. Um, Tobacco was grown there. This is one of the oaks of the Oak Ridge. Oh, they have a beaver. They love their beaver there. As you can see, those are the Blue Ridge Mountains. It was just a treat. I can't tell you how wonderful it was. It was just gorgeous. I had a great time. 400 acres of just whatever you want to do. So in Lynchburg, here's another little trivia piece. This is a flag. This is actually, I think, one of the first Confederate flags to come out, and it's stars and bars, I think. And this is the description. This flag was made probably in Lynchburg in the mid 1861, the Confederate First National. Um, and I thought it was interesting because they're starting to form their country, their confederacy, and I just thought it was that's interesting to me. But more interesting is the 11th Virginia Infantry began with 1,000 men, mostly from Lynchburg, and served in most of the major battles under General Lee. And at the surrender at Appomattox, 27 men were all that remained. And I had heard that if you were under the command of General Lee, you had a very slim chance of living. He had one of the highest mortality rates of any general, is what I understand. So they called Grant the Butcher. Go figure. This was just for fun. Here's Civil War weapons just for kids. Now, this you probably all recognize. This is the Appomattox Courthouse. And I did the Civil War backwards. I got to Georgia, and of course, that was kind of where it ended. And I ended up in Virginia, and that's kind of where it began. So here I am at Appomattox. And I was really taken by this, which I didn't know, which was that there wasn't photography available for most moments. And so people sketched a lot of sketches using charcoal from fires, which I like. It's very interesting to me that this is the moment of surrender at Appomattox. This is another watercolor of Appomattox, and there was an apple tree where I guess Grant and Lee had met, and they kind of had a quick half-hour conversation about what the surrender might look like. And I think that was the day of. Help me with that if anybody's got any more information on that. But I liked it because it was a watercolor, and it really shows you the terrain of what things looked like at that time. Here is another watercolor of what Appomattox looked like on that day around that time. Here's the table. Here's another table. And of course, you've all seen the pictures with everyone in the room. Now, me being the nerd I am, I was extremely curious about the carpet. And so I hit the docent up on the carpet, and they had the carpet remade, evidently, to the original pattern and colors of the carpet that was there, which I find fascinating. And then there's this little guy. So souvenirs were very popular, and in the room during the signing of the surrender was this little doll called the Silent Witness. And someone had taken that out of the room, and it floated around for about 100 years or so. And somewhere in the 50s or 60s, the family actually returned it to Appomattox. And so that was kind of a neat little piece of trivia that I thought was, this is kind of how I did the Civil War. I was really into the little details of daily things. And so it was very popular for people to cut things up, flags, anything they could get their hands on as souvenirs. Being an architecture freak, this is classic federal style, which I love. It's simple, it's clean. Um, I can't get enough of it. Anyway, and this is actually the spot, I guess, where the apple tree was, where Grant and Lee met on the morning of April 10th. And then I walk the grounds. As I do, I walk every inch of every battlefield I come to. And then this is actually what a battlefield looks like that hasn't been, well, cut every week. So this is very accurate from what I'm told as to what these soldiers encountered in battles. Since I was by myself and had no children, dogs, or wife, I was able to do all kinds of things. And this is the Battle of Five Forks. And there it is, Five Forks. All right, and so here's another piece that I really like, which is Stonewall Jackson, who was evidently out on recon. And of course, as most of you know, he was shot on his way back and shot in the arm, and that's the spot. And then someone evidently, I think the Reverend, it says, the Reverend came to visit him in the hospital and saw his arm laying outside of the door, and he gathered up the limb and carried it across the fields to his brother's estate, Elwood, and buried it here in the family cemetery, which I just think is hilarious that Stonewall Jackson's arm is buried here. And I don't think Lincoln slept there either. So, and then I had the very fortunate experience of seeing a reenactment. And this is at Sailor's Creek, which is along the retreat, the line, the chase is what I call it, chasing Lee across Georgia. And so I was really taken by these artillery groups that come out and do these presentations, and I got a full-on, pretty good education on each person's role and what it takes to get a cannon to fire. And it was just fascinating to me. And I really enjoyed meeting the people and hearing their stories and hearing them talk about their equipment. And it was just a lot of fun. So anyway, at Sailor's Creek, the war is pretty much over, and so you can see there's not many Union represented in this reenactment. But basically, they're telling these last Confederates to, just surrender or get shot. And so that was kind of what they were doing in this reenactment. And of course, the cavalry came in and rounded them up, and that was the end of that. So the next piece of thing that I thought was very interesting is called the crater. The crater is part of the Petersburg campaign, I guess, or whatever happened there. And so, as you can see, this battlefield has been maintained very well, unlike the one back at Appomattox, which I kind of dig. And so the crater was I guess it was a place where they stored a lot of ammunition. I'm not sure, but basically, the Union, a group from Pennsylvania, tunneled 500 feet to that clump of trees you see in the distance there, and blew up the armory there. And so they go into detail about the tunnel, the direction of the tunnel, and you can actually see that the Confederates almost landed on top of them with their own tunnels. It was kind of a trench war that they were having there. And so it was successful to some extent. They were showing how they ventilated the shaft, which was tricky, and they pulled it off. So they were able to successfully create a huge explosion, 170 feet wide, or I'm sorry, 170 feet long, 80 feet wide, and 30 feet deep. And that was kind of I don't know, just an awesome little piece of the war that's not really, I've never heard of it. So I happily stumbled into that little rabbit hole of nonsense. Um, oh, look, it's more federal architecture, my favorite. Um, this is near Brandy Station, and this is one of the graffiti houses. And I don't know if you've ever heard of the graffiti house. It's gaining a lot of publicity, and this is where soldiers wintered. Typically, officers had good penmanship, so they were signing the walls. Your typical enlisted man would be doing the drawings. So you'll see combinations of signatures and drawings, and they've actually got, I think, three or four more graffiti houses where soldiers wintered and killed time, whatever, in whatever way they could. So here's some sketches. I found that fascinating. It was really interesting. They'd actually tracked down some of the people and had stories, and as you can see, pictures of the people that signed the walls. This I just really got a kick out of. This is a Civil War period envelope showing Abe Lincoln giving Jefferson Davis the boot, leaving his mark. I knew I'd get a chuckle somewhere. Uh, Here we are. You probably recognize this. This is Harper's Ferry, and that is Jefferson Rock. Harper's Ferry was pivotal for me, just having been to the Owen Brown presentation at the Altadena Library. So this is kind of why I included this because it was such an important part for me and the Civil War. But anyway, that is I think that is part of the armory, and I think the real armory is kitty corner across the street where they were with all the guns and stuff. But this is what they show you in the tourist version of Harper's Ferry. There's the Potomac and train bridge, and it was all very interesting and very beautiful, as you can see that day. There are some of the guns. They did a really good job with that. Here is, of course, Gettysburg. I hope you all are familiar with this clump of trees. It's super famous. I am indebted to the American Battlefield Trust for priming me on all these trips to all these battlefields. Of course, I would watch these presentations on YouTube, and then I could go in to a site and have a lot more background than I would just reading the information placards. So this is Pickett's charge, or whatever you choose to call it. I walked it. I wanted to know what it was like for oh many thousands of men to lose their lives. And that's looking back towards the Confederate lines. And then this is looking forward towards the Union lines. That was a hot, muggy day, and I could really feel what it might have been like during those times. And I was there for 3 days. Imagine that. Um, and really, Gettysburg, it's huge, it's wonderful. There's so much there. Um, but I did want to walk this. This was a really bucket list thing for me was to walk this charge that these poor souls lost their lives in. And then this is my hero. This is Longstreet. You can see that he's presented in the dirt. I guess, the Confederacy did not look well upon him. I guess they saw him as a traitor. And so this is what they did for his statue, which I really liked. And he was quite a man. I respect him, even though he was a Confederate. And then I'm done. So here I am in Salineville, Ohio, which is the northernmost point, and you probably already know of the Confederacy. And this is where Morgan's raid took place. And I'm contemplating, I've just had almost 7 months of complete Civil War immersion. I am up to my eyeballs in Civil War. I've done almost every battlefield that there was in Virginia and Georgia and parts of Alabama. And so I'm thinking, what am I going to do now? What more could there be? Hmm, how about what if we did lighthouses of the Great Lakes? So that was my next adventure was lighthouses of the Great Lakes, and I drove around all the Great Lakes and I went to about 80 lighthouses and had a great time. It was really wonderful. And there was nothing to do with the Civil War, or so I thought, because I ended up on Johnson Island, which is a Confederate prison cemetery. This was a prison camp on Lake Erie. And I thought I was done with the Civil War, but well, the Civil War wasn't done with me. So this was kind of my last jaw-dropping shocker of I thought I was done. So anyway, that's my story. And this is a lighthouse. And if you look just about at 11 o'clock of the left side of that lighthouse, you'll see the comet. I don't know if I can zoom in, but there is the comet. I don't know if you remember that, but it was captured on film in this photo. And that's it. So I'm a proud person that shows up every month at the Pasadena Civil War Roundtable, and I'm just indebted to each and every one of you for all of the knowledge and fun and good times that we have there talking about people and history and stuff. So anyway, thanks so much, and that ends my presentation.
So, Dan, in the comments, Liz said, thank you for sharing your Civil War history journey. And John Sarna also mentioned that if you take a look at the opening minutes of the movie Cold Mountain, it said there's a good recreation of the explosion in the ensuing battle for Battle of the Crater.
Okay.
I'd like to ask a couple of questions and make a couple of additional comments. One question: when you were at Vicksburg, did you see the USS Cairo?
The boat?
Yes.
I did not, but I read all about it, and that was a huge moment, I think, in naval war, right?
The sunk by an underwater mine.
Yeah.
But if you're back in that area, very definitely see the Cairo. And I'm going to give you a little teaser about one thing. You were talking about Jackson's arm. Well, do a little bit of research. I'm daring you to do this, mind you. But look into the life and career of a fellow by the name of Daniel Sickles. Daniel Sickles. And before the war, he shot and killed his wife's lover and got away with it because for the first time in American court, he pled not guilty by reason of temporary insanity. But you will want to kind of read about what happened to Sickles' leg
Oh,
at Gettysburg.
okay.
I'm not going to spoil it. I'm not going to spoil it.
It sounds good.
But definitely read up on Sickles' leg. And sort of a challenge, not only to you, but to everyone. Um, there are two battlefields. I don't know if you've ever visited them. One's here in Arkansas, the other's in Tennessee. And they are the top two most preserved, most pristine Civil War battlefields, period. The one in Tennessee, of course, is better known as Shiloh. But the
Mhm.
one here in Arkansas is way up, uh, very near, just about within sight of the Missouri line, and it's up in northwestern Arkansas. So I don't know if you're ever going to get hired by a little company that's headquartered up there. This little company called
Walmart.
Walmart. to do any publicity work for them or anything. But if you are in Bentonville, Arkansas, you're a very, very short distance away from Pea Ridge. Pea Ridge is, let me see, is approximately 99.8% preserved within the boundaries of the National Military Park. And Pea Ridge is also one of the very few locations where you're going to see white Union troopers, white Southern Confederate troopers, and Native American troopers fighting for the Confederacy, primarily Cherokee and Choctaw at Pea Ridge. So, but Pea Ridge is something that a lot of people don't know about. It was the single largest engagement fought west of the Mississippi. And we've got it here in Arkansas. So if you're looking to visit some additional battlefields, definitely. And if you have not visited Shiloh or Pea Ridge, visit them.
I've also had a couple of people comment in the chat that George Meade was actually responsible for building a number of lighthouses prior to the Civil War. So kind of an interesting aside there. Emily also mentioned that you were talking about Find Your Twin. She said that that's also available for women that were posing as soldiers, nurses, and some surgeons. So an opportunity for all in there. Emily also is mentioning that during the Civil War, Grant, a little more than 15% of the soldiers under his command to combat, while Lee lost a little over 20% of his soldiers to command and combat.
Thanks for all that.
And thank you, Dan. Well, let's move on to our next presenter, and that would be Brad.
Oh, okay. Hi, everyone. I have a story about that cemetery with Jackson's arm. It's at Elwood Plantation, and I've been doing a lot of research on the wilderness battlefield this year. And I met a guy at Cedar Mountain. He was going to put in a little fence around a little cemetery back in the woods before the state park takes ownership of the land being transferred from the Battlefield Trust. And he knew all about Elwood, and I asked him to take me over there, and he gave me a tour of the plantation. And he said a lot of people, it's a beautiful old house. It was General Warren's headquarters during the battle on May 5th, and later Burnside on May 6th. But a lot of people just go to that cemetery to see, they're fans of Stonewall Jackson, and they gather around the cemetery and they have little mournful ceremonies and things. And some of them don't respect the fence around the property of the cemetery. So they step in and they go into the cemetery. And Joe, who was my guide, Joe LaFleur, said, you know, he would try to prevent people from doing that. And one time there was a group of people there, and he said, "Get out of the cemetery. You're standing on the babies' graves." And they were kind of shocked, but he had done research of who was buried in that family plot. And there were apparently a couple of infants buried there, and they were standing on top of the graves, because there's a lot of graves here without any stones. They're everywhere in these private cemeteries. So they're just not marked. So that was the little story I have about that cemetery. There's also, Joe took me around, there's traces of the original turnpike and other things there that he showed me. But I was trying to guess, I was trying to decide what to talk about, since I live here and I've been all over these battlefields and had a lot of fun, but I thought I'd personalize it a little. I still work on my website, 13thmassachusetts.org. And a couple years ago, I have a lot of artifacts from my great-great-grandfather, and but I know he wrote a lot of letters, and I didn't have any of his letters when I started my research around the year 2000. And around 2012, somebody contacted me, and they found a letter of my ancestor for sale on eBay, and I bought it. So I had one. A couple of years ago, a guy from Tennessee contacted me, and he says, "I think I have one of your ancestors' letters." And I said, he found me through my website, which is why I mentioned it. And so indeed he did, and he sold it to me for cost. So I have a letter he wrote also at Harper's Ferry. Oh, this one's from Williamsport. The first one was from Harper's Ferry. So now I have two letters that he wrote, which I'm really proud to have. So that was one thing that happened. And to continue on the subject of my great-great-grandfather, when I'm doing my research, I'll often go to find a grave and poke around, and sometimes I'll find out about a soldier I'm looking up. And there was somebody who had posted all these pictures of my ancestor's cemetery plot. She was in the town of Westboro, Massachusetts. So I wrote to her and I said, what's your interest in the Forbush family? And she was just one of these people that likes find a grave and that's her. She likes to take pictures of different families, but there was a family connection, and her name was Ginny Fisher, and we are connected through family going back to about the time of the Civil War soldier. The interesting thing is she grew up, I found out, in a building that was called the Forbush Inn, which was the oldest building in Westboro. And they tore it down in 1973. It was built in 1699 by one of my great-great-great-great-grandfathers. And I don't know how it came about, but she told me her uncle had owned the house right before they tore it down. And she said she lived there when she was a little girl. So that was another connection I had with her. And the building doesn't stand anymore. And she told me her father would have liked to have purchased it, but it was on what became a very busy highway between Westboro and Boston. So it became a very expensive property. And they were going to move it, and it was the oldest building in town, so there was a bit of a fuss raised because this was before there were any historical societies. And the town sort of came up with a compromise and said, well, we'll move it to a piece of our city land. And they cut it in half because it was too big, and then they put it in this ditch, and it became a fire hazard. I guess vagrants would go in there and party. And it eventually, just was burned down. So the town destroyed it. So it's all gone. But I found it interesting that she would take pictures of my ancestor's grave, and she grew up in the building that was the Forbush Tavern. And I asked her what it was like, or if she had any pictures of the interior, but she didn't. But to follow up, my ancestor who served in the Civil War, his stone in the cemetery is just a flat stone with his initials, WHF, and there's some other family members there. His wife is on the other side, and his mother is there, and then I guess one of his grandchildren that died in infancy is there. But I noticed a couple times I've gone up to Westboro to do research, and I noticed he didn't get a flag on Memorial Day because nobody knew. There was nothing to indicate he was a veteran of the Civil War. So this woman I contacted on Find a Grave, she wrote to me last summer, and she said, I met the guy in charge of that region who's responsible for getting veteran headstones for just this kind of instant. And she got me in touch with him, and he said, yes, we can get a marker, a Civil War period marker for your great-great-grandfather's grave. So I filled out the paperwork, and the paperwork went through, and I just got word last week that they've got the stone in, and I'm going to go up there. They said the ground is frozen over right now. He actually died in January of 1881. So, but I had planned, I was remembering some of the services I went out to when I was in California, and I think it was Kathy Ralston that she dedicated something similar like this at Mountain View one year, and I was there. So I wanted to have a little ceremony for the rededication of my Civil War ancestors' grave site. And he was in 2 units during the war, and I could only choose one to put on the headstone. So I chose the local boys. It's going to say 13th Mass Volunteer Infantry. So they're going to install the stone in the spring. And I contacted some reenactors, and they want to have an honor guard there. And the agent who helped me get the stone said that he would contact the local press. So I'm planning, I'm planning this. Nothing's concrete at this point because the stone isn't installed. But he'll finally have a proper marker that'll show that he's a veteran, and I'm sure he'll get a flag now on Memorial Day, which was kind of the impetus to do all of this. No one in my family is interested in this whatsoever. In fact, my brother said, "Are they going to remove the old stone?" And I said, "Well, I don't know what they're going to do. They'll probably just put the new one behind it," which is what they told me they would do. But I'm very excited about this. And of course, my friend Ginny Fisher, she's going to be there. And I'm going to have a color guard, and they said they might fire a salute. And so I'm thinking now what kind of ceremony to have. I know there were GAR ceremonies that they did when they buried the soldiers, and but I thought I would just recount his service in the war, maybe read a couple excerpts from his letters that I have. And I also have his diary, of course, of 1863, but just talk a little about him. And I also have his original, I have the obituary for when he died, so I can go over that. But that's all been happening, and it's all on a very personal level, so I'm really excited about all of that. So that's really the news. And the other thing I was just going to mention, when I initially thought I'd call in, what could I talk about? Well, I read a fascinating book that I guess a lot of historians frown upon it, but I thought it was wonderful. So I just thought I'd point it out. It's The Battle of the Wilderness by Morris Schaff. And I don't know if anybody's ever heard of it. He was a young staff officer on General Warren's staff during the Battle of the Wilderness. It was his first active campaign. And what I like about the book is he doesn't just talk about the battle. He invents these kind of, well, he calls it the spirit of the wilderness and the spirit of slavery. And he goes off on these wild fancies of imagination, writing about the dense woods and seeing the spirit of the wilderness hovering over the woods and all the significance of the war and the fighting. And he wrote this rather late in life, but I'd never read anything like it by an actual veteran, and I just thought it was fascinating. So I thought I'd throw it out to you. My guide who took me around Elwood was Joe LaFleur, and he said it was one of his favorite books too. But a lot of the historians, they kind of frowned on it for its flights of fancy. But I just think it's wonderful. Another thing he did, which is in this book, is he went down to Spotsylvania, where there's a little small monument to the Maryland Brigade that charged on May 8th. And I guess he knew some of the guys who died. And in his book, he recounts how he stood over that monument and he read this poem or passage over the monument. So I have a lot of interest in that particular day's battle. The 13th Massachusetts lost several men there. It was one of their last fights where they had a lot of casualties, and they were still together as a unit in a brigade, because after that battle, there was nothing left of their brigade. So I decided I was going to go down there in the spring sometime and bring Morris Schaff's book and read the poem over the monument again. So anyway, that's all I have right now. It's nice to see everybody after so long, and to be able to share this story with somebody that might actually care about it. So that's all I have.
Well, thank you, Ben.
Emily is saying congrats and huzzah, and she asked if you could please record the ceremony and share an excerpt of that this time next year.
Sure, if the TV stations are there, there'll be something. The ironic thing is I have this ongoing struggle with the Westboro Historical Society. They have a lot of photographs, but they are very reluctant to share any of them with me, and yet they know about my work. And but anyway, it'll be interesting when I'm there in person, and again, maybe make some overtures with them at this ceremony if they would please share some of their photographs with me. But
Liz also mentioned that she needs to be able to get a headstone for a Civil War veteran of hers, and that she asked where you found the contact information. But Emily actually mentioned and put a link in to be
yeah,
able to talk about a VA form that needs to be filled out and a phone
yeah,
number
yeah.
to be able to share.
It was this woman I met through Find a Grave who wrote to me, and she had made contact with the agent in Massachusetts on Facebook, and she sent me his contact information, and I wrote to him, and he responded. He said, yes, your ancestor is eligible for this headstone, and you pick out a choice and you fill out a form, and they wanted proof of his service. So you can't just say, you have to verify. So I sent them some documents. I think I sent them his discharge papers and things like that. And it went through. So I was really excited, trying to get some family interested in it. And I don't think there's any takers.
Well, moving along, we have Janet.
I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. There we go. So earlier this year, I thought very carefully, we're going to need to do something in December, and I need to get started on it now. And I finished it yesterday. So much for early planning. But I've got a little story about Civil War valentines. And where do you go when you want to find a collection of Civil War valentines? Well, none other than our own local treasure, the Huntington Library, has a wonderful collection of valentines, which includes obviously the period of the Civil War. But the collection goes from 1493 to the late 2010s. So I knew I could find what I needed. I didn't know that they had about 40 boxes of valentines and that I needed a really good finding aid to find the era that I wanted. But I got to them. So I'm going to be sharing that with you tonight and giving you a little bit more information about love in the Civil War. During the Civil War, publishing companies, of course, would advertise to retailers about valentines that they could purchase from the wholesalers on these, that lots of cards could be purchased from 25 cents to $2 per dozen, and that single valentines sold for prices ranging from 5 to 75 cents. And the following pages show examples of comic valentines, specifically for soldiers in the Union Army to send to their friends and enemies anonymously. These are likely purchased from sutlers who were vendors that camped with the Union Army and sold items to the soldiers. But in the samples, I want you to notice the hand watercoloring on the samples and the page numbers in the upper right corners for use in ordering. So this is for the return of the 3-year volunteer. Your time is up and you have come with blast of bugle, roll of drum. What meets your gaze? Your tidy wife and the stern realities of life. And to the surgeon, ho ho, old sawbones, here you come. Yes, when the rebels whack us, you are always ready with your traps to mangle, saw, and hack us. To the officer who paid for his commission, likely this was one of those anonymous sent valentines. Charge, boys, charge, while I stand behind a tree. The fighting is for you, and it's left for me to see. I suppose you will ask me how I got my position. I hauled out my money and paid for my commission. But what about the sweethearts back home? What did they have to send to the soldiers? Well, the sutlers were prepared for that. They knew that the soldiers were going to be sending valentines, so the retailers back home had their valentines for the ladies as well. They were hand colored, as you can see in the samples here, lace paper or embossed paper, and even had customized verse places at the bottoms of the valentines so that you can insert. The one on the right shows a cut from a book of verses that you could cut out the verse you liked and paste that onto your valentine, or write your own Valentine's verse in the book part here. The brightest star that I can see was never half so bright as thee. So you can see the intricacy of these valentines, embossed paper, hand coloring, beautiful artwork, and then the sentimental verse as well. These were some that were customized with the soldier's photo that could be slipped underneath the valentine in the cutout hole there so that he could send that to his sweetheart. And for the poetically challenged, there were books of ready-made verse that could be purchased, allowing the soldier to write his own love letter. And it shows the letter here. The first paragraph is, Valentine's Day at length has come, and finding me away from home, I thought I would drop a line to one I long have wished was mine. And it goes on for several stanzas. They even had embossed envelopes for mailing. And you'll see the intricacies of some of these homemade valentines. This one was done on a cut piece of paper. Brad just showed you the letter from his ancestor was on lined paper. That was the kind of paper that the soldiers had available to them. So this is one of those lined sheets of paper cut very intricately. And both sides have the writing on it from February of 1863. I don't know what kind of knife or scissors. He certainly wouldn't have had an X-Acto knife to do this, but it looks like that kind of quality cut that it must have spent a long time to do that, and hopefully would have impressed his sweetheart back home. There were plenty of options for the ladies at home to send to their sweethearts. You can see this one has got the lace embossed paper. It's got a hand-colored picture in the middle, and then it's got 3D embellishments on the Valentine itself, the rings, hearts, and stars. These two have photographs that could be slipped into the Valentine to send to their sweetheart at the front. And on the back, you'll notice that there were tax stamps on these. And David, correct me if I'm wrong here, but tax stamps were required for a certain 18-month period for photographs.
They
was
were,
part of the
yes.
Internal Revenue Act.
Yeah.
And the 18-month period there applied to photographs. Specifically, it was added to the act. The original act was in 1862. And it's a very helpful device for dating photographs or CDVs from the Civil War when you can find one of these with tax stamps on the back. So that's really kind of cool. It also had artistic cut valentines. Once again, you cannot, I cannot imagine the time it must have taken a soldier to cut something like this on what appears to be tissue paper, put onto one of these lined sheets of paper. And this looks like it might have been the backside of a printed one that had an eagle on the front, and that he put the Valentine cutout on the back. This one is just amazing to me. The next page, I've enlarged it a bit, but it is just so intricate that I can't imagine this guy got any fighting done if this was what he was doing in February. It's just an amazing piece of artwork. But this is the one I really went to the library to find. And I'd heard about this and read about it in an article that they had what I'm calling an interactive soldier Valentine, but it's kind of like a 3D Valentine of a soldier's tent. And you open the flaps and you see the soldier inside the tent. So that was kind of the holy grail of what I wanted to find at the Huntington. And I was able to do that and photograph it for you. And thank you for listening to the little bit of Valentine history.
That's great.
Yeah, that's amazing. Did you have to go through a lot of Valentines to find that period, or?
They were sorted. The boxes were sorted by period.
Oh, okay.
They had all those comic valentines at the front of it, but I was looking more for ones that soldiers might have sent to their sweethearts. So I think I went through about 4 different boxes. And as you saw in the photographs, they were all in sheets of archival plastic, which
That's,
doesn't make for great photographs, but
yeah.
it certainly protects them. And it gave me the opportunity to see quite a lot of different examples. So those are just a few of the ones that I saw and photographed. But I thought it was an interesting exercise in little known history of the Civil War.
Well, that is really interesting. Someone sent me something like similar that he found. He was a collector. And he said, no one's ever done an article about this subject.
Ah,
And if you look at the old Harper's weeklies that are online,
mhm.
every Valentine's Day, they did a big spread of people getting and sent soldiers sending Valentines, but I'd never seen an actual Valentine.
Yeah, in the history I read, it said that Valentine's Day was celebrated during the entire month of February. So the males being what they were during those days, it gave you a little bit more time to get your Valentine.
Janet, did you parlay your background in the Civil War Roundtable here in Pasadena to get into the museum or to the
I,
Huntington?
I have a reader's card at the Huntington
You do.
that
That's
was
what
a
I've got.
result of a research project a couple of years ago where I was asked to go in and photograph something, and the publisher that contacted me knew me from the Civil War Roundtable. So in a roundabout way, I'm
Sure.
there because of the Civil War Roundtable. But I've kept
Fire.
renewing the reader's card so that if I come up with little projects like this, I can still get in there.
I know it requires a certain amount of gravitas to get in there.
It does. I needed a letter from the publisher actually to get the reader's card. But once I had it, I wasn't going to give it up. So I just keep renewing it on a timely basis. I see Emily noted in the chat why the woman was on a barrel, and I don't have an answer for that one.
She's going to go over Niagara Falls. I don't know.
Oh, we have something from David.
Yep. So first off, I do have something that I wanted to be able to share that I had actually prepared in advance. But when John was talking about his coins, it reminded me that in 1985, I bought this wallet, which I actually have been carrying literally every day since then as my daily wallet. Believe it or not, it's 40 years old now. But one of the first things that I did when I bought the wallet, it was that I went to a coin store and I bought my own 2-cent piece. In fact, I've got, let me bring it up so I can share it here. I did a quick shot of it when, just to be able to show it. I literally asked him for the worst one that he had, and he said, "Oh, I've got ones that are better than this." I said, "No, I want it because I want to stick it in my wallet so that I can carry it with me. And when somebody asks me for my 2 cents, that I can pull it out and just toss out a 2-cent piece." So that's what I bought it for, was literally to be able to do that. He tried to be able to get me a more expensive one. He was asking $4 for it, and I got it for $3. So I think that was a pretty good deal, and I've had that literally in my wallet ever since. And actually, this weekend, Stephanie and I went to dinner, and that I pulled. It's tucked in behind the credit card, and I pulled the credit card out, and I accidentally dropped the coin, and the waitress noticed it, and she actually handed it back. So, which I thought was terrific. But yeah, it's been with me ever since. But what I wanted to be able to talk about, though, and I'm going to do this really quick, was a couple of things that I've done with AI in the last year. I did 2 things that I thought was interesting. The first one is just a quick story that I'll tell you about. Um, you hear so much about AI lately and how that it does these things that are just, you know, that it will come up with stories that are completely unreal and completely made up and completely fabricated. And I thought, I wonder what it would do if I ask to be able to say, I would like to be able to have a 1,000-word article on the Battle of Gettysburg and how accurate it would be and really what I could get out of that. So I did that, and actually had it write an article about that. And it did a good job. And I mean, it wasn't anything terribly special, but it was accurate. I didn't see anything that was off base or untrue. But I thought, they say that AI actually has the ability to be able to go in and actually produce fictional stuff as well. So I thought, well, I'll ask the same thing. Write a 1,000 word article on the Battle of Gettysburg with lasers. So I added those 2 words in, and it actually, in about 10 seconds, it came back with this very fanciful story. I did not keep it. I probably should have, but it was a very fanciful story about how lasers factored into the Battle of Gettysburg, which I thought was very interesting and very amusing. But from there, actually, for those of you that don't know or don't recall, Stephanie actually writes for Civil War News, and she writes articles. She writes a column called "Through the Lens," which is about a Civil War event, and it's done through photographs from the time period, and then I do the rasterization and the colorization for those. This year, she gave me a couple of photographs that she wanted me to be able to do, and I've had these type of things before and ran into challenges, and they were like, I can't do it. It's too small. It's not good enough quality. There's no way to be able to accomplish this. And she gave me a couple of them this year that fell into those realms. This is one that she asked me to be able to do. This is literally how big it is, and it's so small that I can't even get like a 1 by 2 inch image if you're going to try to print it, and it wouldn't work. So what I did was I took this, I put it into ChatGPT, and I said, restore and colorize this image as if it were taken today, and this is what I got. And it's just astounding. And this actually, the version that I have here, I had to shrink it down to be able to get it on the screen. The one that's on the left is the actual size of the image. The one that's on the right is actually about twice as wide and twice as tall. This is how I had to get it to share on the screen. But it's amazing. I had this image to be able to go into the article where I would not have been able to utilize the image on the left. So it actually helped us to be able to save the article for what she wanted to be able to do. Another one along the same realm for Egbert Brown that this one had been provided. In fact, it had a signature at the bottom for that, and it produced this along with the signature, which I didn't need the signature. I didn't include it in the final image that went on there, but I thought it was terrific to be able to give me something. Again, the original is actually a bit larger than this, so something that I could actually really work with, which was really terrific. The last one that I wanted to be able to share on here was one that, again, too small to be able to really do a decent print, and then it produced this particular image. Now, when I looked at this image, it was a good image, and I really like it, particularly what it did with his hair and the style in here. But there were a couple of problems. First off, these buttons should be brass, and the embellishments on here on his uniform should actually be in gold. And then where the sleeves are, these should be more in a light beige. So I actually did go in and actually restored those. So I did those so that I updated it so that it was actually correct. But just a little bit of things that you can do. It's like I honestly thought I have no need for AI, for artificial intelligence. I'd like to be able to do the work. But when I saw what I could do to be able to do things that just aren't possible, that I wanted to be able to share it because I just found it interesting that it's possible to be able to do this kind of things these days. Yes, ma'am. You're on mute. Yeah.
Going to put you out of business?
I don't think so. Two things in regards to that. So first off, that like I was showing on that final one, that there were mistakes that needed to be corrected. So I think that's where it's going to come into play. But on the other half, that using those, I find it really great to be able to go in and to be able to do scenes where there's a lot of I've used it for like colorizing images where there's a lot of trees and forests and things in the background. I can spend 3-4 hours doing those, and then I can spend half an hour doing the subjects. But when I use a program to be able to do that, that I can actually get all the background done in a matter of seconds, and then I can spend my time on the soldiers because it oftentimes doesn't choose correct uniforms, styles. It's like there's elements about the soldiers that I know that need to be introduced, and that the automated things don't pick up on, so I can correct those. But the time that it takes to be able to do the background stuff is just very tedious. So it's really been helpful with that.
Could you tell AI to make those corrections and it would do that?
Possibly, but you got to go in and really put in every single element.
Yeah.
I found it actually easier because I did that. In fact, there's the question Emily asked, what is the program that you were using for AI? There's a number of different ones out there. The one that I used for all three of these examples that I was showing was just Chat GPT. So I just did it and just popped the image in there and then just wrote the description and what I wanted to be able to do. But some of the things like with the sleeve and things, it's like trying to be able to describe that, what I wanted to be able to do and the colors that I wanted to be able, it was just easier to bring it into Photoshop and just fix it because it didn't
Still,
take me
yeah.
very long to be able to do that. Yeah.
Not many people could do what you do, though. You got to
Well,
do
Jim, I
something.
appreciate that. But, it was more um, that the tedious parts of doing those things, like I said, if you're painting in every single branch on a tree, it can take hours and hours and hours. And now, it's like, oh, all the tedious part can be moved out of the way. And the fun part that I enjoy is focusing on the soldiers, the uniforms, the things that, not the background elements, but what's in the foreground of the image. So focus on those type of things.
Would AI allow you to put yourself into a Civil War scene?
Oh yeah, there's a lot of things you can do for those. I haven't actually tried for
Ooh,
those, but I've actually been looking at a few of those type of things, and yeah,
gotta
I
be
do
in
see,
a
yeah, I
scene.
do see things that you can do for
A little cameo there, David.
that. And Emily, you're mentioning Nano Banana Pro. Yeah, it's actually part of Photoshop now. You can actually do it directly with inside of Photoshop. But that I was actually exploring this like 6 months ago. So it was just that's the one that I had that was available at the time to be able to do that.
Well,
That's
thank
what I
you,
got.
David. And I have something that I promised I was bring. I told Janet about this. There was an author of the 19th century who wrote over 100 books, largely historical fiction, 18 of them about the American Civil War. What was unusual about this is that 9 of them were about the navies of the Civil War in historical fiction, and that all of his successful books were written under pseudonyms. The gentleman's real name was William Taylor Adams, and he was a school board member in Massachusetts for many years. He served one term in the Massachusetts state legislature, but cranked out over 100 books between the 1850s and the 1890s. And he started writing Civil War historical fiction while the war was still going on. So his first series of 6 books ended just after the war ended. Then later on in his life, after he'd written a bunch of other stuff, he decided he wanted to go back and write a dozen more Civil War books. And the thing was, these were primarily written for boys, children, and young adults to read as historical fiction. That was what he was really successful with. When he tried to write books for adults, they bombed. When he tried to write things that he wasn't as interested in, they didn't do well. But in this particular one I'm going to show you, he talks about how when he was a boy, there were American Revolution veterans still around to tell their stories that were not going to be there for this later generation he was writing for. But in fact, there were still tons of Civil War veterans for them to go out and talk to. And that was one of the things he recommended doing. So this is the cover of Stand by the Union, which was part of the Blue and the Gray series. And this is one of the naval historical fictions. And you may see the images on there. You notice the Grand Army of the Republic medallion on this side, and this is the Confederate veterans insignia that was actually being used in the late 19th century. And this is just, these books were about 300 pages each. He wrote 100 of them at that size, plus a few shorter ones. And he was just cranking them out from the 1850s till he passed away. He had written almost the final volume of his last Civil War series, and he died with the manuscript not quite complete. The man who finished the manuscript and got it to the publishers actually became famous himself because his business was publishing children's books starting just a few years later. Mr. Stratemeyer founded the group that published the Bobbsey twins and the Hardy Boys and Nancy Drew and Tom Swift and all of that. He wrote quite a few of them and hired the authors to write those. But he was the one who finished the last book in this series. The pseudonym that the author used for his historical fiction was the strange pseudonym of Oliver Optic. And all of his best-selling works were under Oliver Optic, not under his real name. He was one of the premier young adult and children's authors of the later 19th century. He even published his own magazine and edited it and hired people to write for that. But this was one of those things. This book came out in the 1890s, about 1891. And this was basically the halfway point of his Civil War stuff that he did. Of the 18, I believe this was the 10th. So I just thought I would show this to you because it's something that I ran across, and I rescued 3 of the volumes out of the 18 that he did. Most of the rest of them you will find are from later editions, but this was the original way they came out. So if you see ones with the medallions on the front, that was at least the first edition, if not necessarily the first printing of an Oliver Optic book, because he just felt this affinity for the veterans of the Civil War because he'd met some of the ones from the Revolutionary War.
Wow.
And he wasn't quite 75 at the time of his death, but he was still cranking out books, multiple books a year, all through his career. So I think we've finished up with our presentations for tonight, as I understand it. But I want to thank all of you for joining us for this, because this has always been a lot of fun. So
Well,
I guess
Emily
we
added some nice information in the chat.
Oh, good.
Yeah, John actually added some trivia mentioning that on the night that Robert Anderson withdrew from Fort Moultrie over to Fort Sumter, that the last veteran of the Battle of Bunker Hill died. And then Emily mentions, according to the image of the woman in the barrel, was featured on a Vinegar Valentine insulting an insulting card intended to mock or critique the recipient. The image was part of a humorous, often crude, social commentary. The barrel was used to contain alcohol. Therefore, it implied that the person photographed liked to imbibe. Interesting for did you know? Thanks, Janet.
After all,
And
who would send an insulting Valentine nowadays?
And Emily is also asking Dan if you can name the movie that you worked on when you were in Atlanta.
Yes, I can. It was Moana 2. It's the live action version with
The
uh,
Rock?
The
Is that the
Rock.
one with The Rock?
Yeah, Dwayne Johnson. Fantastic. We took 30 acres and turned it into 800 AD Samoa. It was incredible.
Thanks, everyone. I appreciate it. Hey, it's great to be able to see everyone again. I really wish that Stephanie and I were in the Pasadena area and we could attend in person. but I really appreciate the opportunity to be able to see people virtually and to be able to hear these stories. So thank you again for your time. I did record this one. I'll provide the link to Janet and that she can share and post it.
And thank you so much to you and Stephanie for hosting this every year. It is a nice tradition for
Absolutely.
us.
Absolutely.
Thanks a lot and happy holidays to everyone. And
Happy
we'll
New
see you at
Year.
the next meeting in January.